If you're working as a project manager, a program manager or PMO, you will likely to get involved in the annual budget or data gathering exercise of most organizations. This means you will need to pull together costs for ongoing and planned projects. Therefore, fundamental knowledge of cost planning is critical for every project manager. In this lecture, you will discuss the basics of cost planning. You will learn what types of costs you need to consider for cost estimating, budgeting, or proposal bidding, how to use an iterative approach for more accurate cost estimating, and how learning curve impact cost. Why is cost planning knowledge important? Because you won't get a project kicked off or approved without looking at costs. Most organizations require project managers to develop a business case. The business case includes the costs and the benefits of a project and help decision makers to compare and prioritize it with other projects. If you don't determine the project cost as a part of the project charter, chances are that your projects won't get approved. Also, you can't manage project costs if you are not incurring costs against a project budget. Therefore, cost planning is critical. In this lecture, we will talk about different aspects of cost planning. I will walk you over a checklist of cost types frequently incurred in projects. Then we will review different cost estimate approaches, including level 0, level 1, level 2. After that, we will review the concept of the learning curve. Cost planning includes cost estimates, bids, or budgets. Cost planning starts with itemizing cost types in a spreadsheet. Cost types are broken down into direct cost, indirect cost, and contingency cost. Direct costs are directly attributable to the cost objects. A cost object can be a project or product. For example, a cost object could be a CRM implementation project, or a cost object could be a website or a car. In manufacturing, the portion of operating cost that is directly assignable to a specific product or process are direct costs. Direct costs are those for activities or services that benefit specific projects. For example, salaries for project staff and materials required for particular project equipment, or costs for subcontractors. Because these activities are easily traced to projects, their costs are usually charged to projects on an item-per-item basis. In contrast, indirect costs are not directly attributable to cost objects, for example, project or product. Indirect costs have to be allocated to cost object on some basis. Examples include costs for supervisor salaries, insurance, training, taxes, maintenance. Indirect costs are those for activities or services that benefit more than one project or product. Their precise benefits are often difficult to trace. For example, it may be difficult to determine precisely how the activities of a director of an organization benefit a specific project. Contingency cost refers to costs that will probably occur based on past experience, but with some uncertainty regarding the amount. These uncertainties are risks to the project. Some refer to these risks as known unknowns because the estimator is aware of them and based on past experience can even estimate their probable cost. The estimated cost of the known unknowns is referred by cost estimators as cost contingencies. For example, you could include inflation allowance, currency exchange variations, or cost for other risk factors. What are some techniques to make cost estimating easier? Most project managers use an iterative approach to estimate cost. Initial project cost estimates have a low accuracy, while estimators later in the project, as more information is known, have a higher accuracy. So first, you start with a level 0, that is a top-down, rough order of magnitude estimate. For example, a project in the initiation phase could have a rough order of magnitude estimate in the range of plus minus 50% of the actual cost. This can be done within a day and will be based on similar projects and expert judgment. Next, as more information is known, you will be able to develop a level 1 estimate in the range of plus minus 25% of the actual cost. This can be done within a few days and will also be based on similar projects and your expert judgment. Later in the project, as more information is known, a bottom-up level 2 estimate narrows down the cost of plus minus 10% of actual cost. A detailed level 2 estimate could take 2 weeks, as it requires itemizing cost based on the types that we discussed. Due to the iterative nature of projects, the more we discover about the project, the more accurate our estimates will be. Spend only as much estimating as needed to make a business decision at hand. Remember that estimating takes time and time is money. Refining your data as we progressively elaborate on your project produces a more definitive estimate. There are two types of cost estimating: top-down and bottom-up. Top-down looks at a project or a large activity as a whole without breaking it down. Bottom-up requires to break down the project into smaller activities to estimate the cost of each and then roll up the individual activities to get the total project. For top-down, you can use analogous or parametric estimating, which we discussed in earlier lectures. Just to briefly recap, analogous estimating uses similar past projects to estimate the duration or cost of your current project, thus the root of the word analogy. For example, if it cost $3,000 to develop a mobile app a few months ago, and you're responsible to develop a new similar mobile app, you may estimate that it also cost $3,000. You can use analogous estimating to categorize and prioritize projects. If a project is similar to other efforts previously accomplished, analogous estimators may assist in sizing the project into small, medium, and a large category projects. When there is limited information regarding the current project, analogous estimating is considered a top-down and is generally not as accurate as other estimating techniques. Parametric estimating uses a mathematical model to determine estimate. It's a more accurate technique for cost estimating and duration and uses the relationship between variables to calculate the cost and duration. Essentially, a parametric estimate is determined by identifying the unit cost or duration and the number of units required for the project or activities. The measurement must be scalable in order to be accurate. For example, if it took me 2 hours to create an e-learning training lecture last week, and this week I'm creating 4 e-learning lectures, I could estimate that it will take 8 hours for 4 e-learning lectures. However, if the first 1 hour was spent on setting up the equipment and preparing it, the estimates would need to be scaled appropriately. 1 hour for setting up the equipment and then 4 hours to create the lectures, which would be a total of 5 hours. One important consideration in cost planning is the learning curve. The concept of the learning curve, that is the cost per unit, decreases with experience as skills and processes improve over time. For example, an experienced programmer will typically produce more or better code than an inexperienced programmer, while an experienced programmer will require a higher per hour rate than an inexperienced programmer. The total cost may be cheaper because the higher per hour rate is offset by more or better output, thus decreasing the total cost. Typically, learning curves produce a cost and time saving of about 10 to 30% each time a company's experience at producing a product doubles. The learning concept can be applied to individual team members and their experience, knowledge, and skill when assigned to project tasks as well. So let's recap the takeaways. Cost planning starts with itemizing cost types in a spreadsheet. Cost types are broken down into direct cost, indirect cost, and contingency cost. There are two types of cost estimating: bottom-up and top-down. Top-down looks at the project at large activity as a whole without breaking it down. Bottom-up requires to break down the project into activities, estimate the cost for each, and then roll up the activities to get the project total. Most project managers use an iterative approach to estimate cost. Initial project cost estimates have a low accuracy called level 0, while estimates later in the project, as more information is known, have a higher accuracy. These estimates are called either level 1 or level 2 estimates. An important consideration of cost planning is the learning curve. The learning curve concept shows that cost per unit decreases with experience as skills and processes improve over time.